Good afternoon, everyone. It's now 12 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Office of Economic Development Business Information Session. My name is Margaret McGee, and I'm the Business Services Manager. Business services assist entrepreneurs and business owners in starting and growing their business. We help in navigating through the different departments within city government to obtain permits and licenses. We also connect the business community with organizations that can provide technical assistance, incentives, resources, and other programs beneficial in operating a business. One way we do this is to host business information sessions. These sessions are held throughout the year, and the topics are gathered from entrepreneurs, surveys, and information we collect from the business community. This is a series of 3 sessions, starting today with Nonprofit 101. I'm pleased to introduce Ms. Kristen Beatty. She's the Associate Executive Director with the Louisiana Alliance for Nonprofits. And she will share her expertise on the process to become a nonprofit, the requirements, and more. I ask that you please place your questions in the chat box and we'll get them answered in the Q&A section. I'll go ahead and turn it over now to Ms. Beatty.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I am Kristen Beatty, and I am as Margaret said, I'm the Associate Executive Director for Louisiana Alliance for Nonprofits, formerly known as LANO. We did a big rebranding in January, and we are just kind of navigating not being LANO anymore. So if LANO resonates with you, then just remember we're commonly referred to as the Alliance now. We look forward to working with all of you after you start your nonprofits, and I hope that I can be of assistance and answer your questions today. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. All right, we're in Nonprofits 101. So what is a nonprofit organization? A nonprofit organization is an incorporated business. It is subject to state and federal laws. It's created for public benefit. Money is reinvested in the mission, not distributed in profits to shareholders or businesses. They are governed by a board of directors and they are volunteer dependent. After weighing the advantages and disadvantages, many people decide to start nonprofit organizations. According to the National Center for Charitable Statistics, there are over 1.5 million 501c3 nonprofit organizations in the United States. Over 19,000 of those are registered in Louisiana. And the 501c3 is only one type of nonprofit organization. The nonprofit sector in Louisiana is vibrantly covering an array of services, from meeting basic human needs to supporting economic development, the arts, and the environment. Many people are surprised by the size, complexity, and degree of competition of the nonprofit sector. The nature of the sector creates challenges and opportunities for nonprofits as they pursue their mission and face strong competition. The word nonprofit, not for profit, is not a business model. That is one of my biggest misconceptions, that everyone says, I'm going to start a nonprofit business. Well, no, you're starting a business that happens to be a nonprofit. Nonprofit is a tax status assigned to a type of business by the IRS. People often use the words nonprofit and tax exempt interchangeably. Congress has created almost 36 types of tax exempt organizations in different sections of the tax code. Each section identifies conditions that must be met to be exempt from paying federal income taxes. The one common condition is not paying out profits. No part of the organization's net earnings can accrue to the benefit of any private shareholder or individual, hence the term nonprofit. There are numerous categories of nonprofit corporations. The 501c3 is the largest subset. Over 1.5, as I stated before, 1.5 million C3 organizations registered in the United States. And I have updated numbers. So 19,000 of those organizations are registered in Louisiana currently, and over 7% of Louisiana's workforce consists of the nonprofit sector. These are some different types of tax exempt federal 501c status organizations. Section 501c4, social welfare organizations, homeowners associations, and volunteer fire companies. Section 501c5 includes labor unions. Section 501c6 includes chambers of commerce, and Section 501k childcare organizations. Section 501c3 of the tax code refers to public charities, also known as charitable nonprofit and private foundations. The tax code considers churches and religious organizations, which the IRS defines to include mosques, synagogues, temples, and other houses of worship, to be public charities. Why do individuals want to start a nonprofit organization? There are so many reasons, but see, these are some of the bigger ones. They make it a lifelong dedication to the mission. They have dedicated years into what they feel is what is needed and what they want in whatever their belief is and whatever their mission is. They have a lack of services in their neighborhoods, lack of quality in available services. Their family or them personally have been impacted by the service. You have a vacant building available, and you may have been told that there's a lot of money for nonprofits. Misconceptions. A second one is that there is a lot of money out there for nonprofit organizations. That is absolutely not the case. It's very difficult, and there's a lot of competition out there for organizations to find money to fund. And a lot of people also think that no one else is doing what they're doing. Also not the case. If somebody has an idea, typically there's another organization in the area or close to the area, and they're doing the same thing. And then they have repetitive efforts, and then they're competing for money. Some of the advantages and disadvantages for starting a nonprofit organization: limited liability, tax advantages, structure, accountability, perpetuity and legally recognized authority, ancillary benefits, and strength of collegial decision-making. Disadvantages: loss of individual control, startup and ongoing paperwork, and startup investment of time and money. What are some other options aside from starting a nonprofit? If you don't have the funding at this time, or you don't have the support, you can volunteer with a nonprofit, you can get a job with a nonprofit, or you can start a for-profit business. Okay, so let's get into the steps. So conduct a market. I always say conduct a market assessment or do some research. Dial 911, hit the web, hit the streets, learn how to others handle their business, how they're doing that. In order to answer a question, if there's an established nonprofit through which you could achieve your aim, you'll need to conduct a market assessment or there's research surveys that you can do. You can reach out to your peers. But by that, we mean you'll need to do some comparisons with organizations who have similar aims. This will help you determine whether you need to start your own nonprofit. Some of you find that there's already someone who does work like yours, and it may prove best to volunteer or work with them. Of course, if you still choose to pursue starting a nonprofit, it will serve you well to learn as much as you can about their successes and areas for improvement. So how do you begin your market assessment? You'll want to call 211, which has a listing of nonprofit services. And you'll want to hit the web to further research similar services in your area. We recommend the website for National Center for Charitable Statistics. Also, you need to talk to people around you, talk to your peers, talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends, your family. Hit the streets, start asking questions, talk to people, including some of the same people you intend to serve. Do these activities, contacting 911, hitting the web, and talking to your people in your area will help you to assess whether your proposed nonprofit will be of true benefit to the community. All right, how do you start a nonprofit? So there's two agencies, Louisiana Secretary of State and the Internal Revenue Service. Additional requirements: incorporating as a nonprofit does not automatically result in a 501c3 status or state sales and income tax exemption. These must be applied for separately. And in Louisiana, there are very separate areas that you need to apply for these exemptions. To successfully attain a 501c3 status, an organization must be able to show a defined charitable purpose and a structure and a structure that ensures that the organization benefits the public, not the employees or the owners of the organization. Consulting with a CPA or lawyer for this process is absolutely 100% advisable. I also like to suggest when you're recruiting your board of directors to look for a CPA and a lawyer that may be able to donate their time. We can talk about that a little bit later. All right, steps to incorporation. Have a very clear and well-developed mission statement. Have a clear description of all the activities of the organization. Have a clear idea of your financial sources and identify who's doing similar work in your community. The mission statement. I always like to suggest a mission statement should be short, no more than 2 sentences. This is really the purpose of your organization. What are you going to be doing? And ensure that this is kind of just an overview. The organization's purpose is defined and approved by the board of directors. The mission statement must be approved by the board of directors. Should be formally and specifically stated. The organization's activities should be consistent with its stated purpose. The mission is, and this is the mission versus vision. The mission is the organization's purpose, defined and approved by the board of directors and specifically stated. Your vision statement is typically longer, and it's a vivid picture of an ambitious future state that is better in some important way than what exists currently. Engaging in strategic thinking. These are the things you need to be thinking about when you're planning the activities of the organization, the programming moving forward. What are the conditions that affect your success? How do you position your organization for competitive advantage? How do you differentiate from your services from other people who are doing the same thing, their collaborators and competitors? How can you be innovative in identifying, providing, and evaluating your services? Make sure you're doing something a little bit different so you're not always competing again for the same funds, for the same type of people that you want to serve. Strategic planning. This is a very long, detailed process, and it involves your board of directors and how you're going to move forward. Strategic planning is done by the board executive management. Strategic planning creates your long-term goals for your organization. It sets the organization priorities and is used to guide decision-making. A lot of times new nonprofits do not have a strategic plan, and they don't have a real idea or any kind of calendar or any way to move forward, and they just jump in and start doing, and it's great. And then all of a sudden, they don't know how to expand. They don't know what programs they can incorporate or what they don't want to incorporate. They don't know how to reach out. And so the strategic plan is usually typically there about 5 years. So you would have a 1, 3, and 5 year goal. At the end of that 5-year goal, then you would reevaluate and do another strategic plan. Some organizations have a 20-year strategic plan. They know starting that they are going to do this long term, and these are their end goals. This is what they want to do. I always suggest with new nonprofits to stick with the 5-year plan. It is it's easier to kind of work with your new board, and if you have employees, with your employees, so that they can see a very clear path in the next few years, and then you can reevaluate on how you want to move forward. Financial support. This is all part of planning. Do you have money to get started? Do you have a plan of where you will get money in the future? Is your plan diversified? Have you already initiated relationships with funders? Do you have expertise with government contracts and writing grants? Will you charge a fee? Do you have enough money to cover cash flow? Do you plan to get paid? All these are very basic questions, but really important. And when you're putting, number one, your strategic plan, but also your budget for the year, where's all of the money coming from? And government contracts and writing grants are not easy. And so if you don't have anyone that is an expert or has any kind of experience in writing those, I would definitely suggest finding someone to get their help with that. A lot of times those grants, it doesn't include just writing the grant. Once you receive the grant, how are you going to manage the grant and the data collection and move forward? I think grants are really important, but however, there's a lot involved in those grants typically. So just kind of keep those in mind. And before you just jump right in and start that nonprofit, there has to be some money coming from somewhere. Financial support, the budget. The budget is always fun for me, but not for everybody else. But it's really important that you have the expenses outlined. What are your administrative expenses, your overhead, basic overhead? Where are you going to operate your business and how are you going to pay for it? And if you have people who will be paid employees, how are you going to pay for them? And your programmatic expenses. Those are very different than your administrative expenses. A lot of times you'll get donors that only want to donate to a program, but they don't want to help with the overhead expenses. And there are not a lot of grants out there to help with administrative and overhead expenses. So kind of think about that when you're creating your budget and your revenue. Again, back, where is it coming from? Grants, corporations, individual donations. Are you going to work with the government on contracts? Kind of keep those in mind when you're creating your budget and kind of creating your fiscal year and how in your strategic plan. Recruit and develop a board of directors. Recruit individuals who believe in your mission, who have expertise. Again, I mentioned a CPA, a lawyer, maybe someone who writes grants, who has experience in nonprofits. If you're an educator, if you're starting an education nonprofit, you definitely want people who have experience in education, those type of individuals, and kind of keep the work background diverse so that you have a really good collaboration on how to move forward with your projects in your nonprofit. Include individuals from the target client population and engage again in your strategic planning. Basic roles of board of directors: determine the organization's mission and purpose. You'll select the chief executive. The chief executive would be your, could be your president or also chair of the board. You support the chief executive and assess his or her performance, ensure effective. Chief executive, okay, so this is a little different. If you're having an executive director, that is very different than a president or chair of your board. So you need to make sure that those roles are clearly defined. And an executive director is a paid employee typically, and a president and chair of the board are not paid. As a board member of any nonprofit organization, you do not get paid. Most nonprofit organizations, you do not get paid for your service. So the board of directors will support the chief executive and assess their performance, ensure effective organizational planning, ensure adequate resources, manage resources effectively, determine, monitor, and strengthen the organization's programs and services, enhance the organization's public standing, ensure legal, ethical integrity, and maintain accountability, recruit and orient new board members, and assess its own performance. All right, step 3, reserve a corporate name. When you're reserving these corporate names, the one tip that I'm going to give is make sure you have 3 or 4 as a backup. A lot of times you may have people who have reserved names and they have 10 different names to support their mission, and you may have a similar mission and you want to kind of use the same name. So just make sure you have a backup when you're reserving your corporate name. You can go to the Secretary of State website to reserve that corporate name. Obtain your EIN number, employer identification number. Your EIN is not your 501c3 tax designation. Please remember that. This is just what you get from the IRS that identifies you in their system. And that is free. That is not a charge. Your articles of incorporation. Print the Form 395 and complete it in blue ink. This is with the Secretary of State. Use a physical address, not a PO box. Initial board of directors, 3 different people, not including your registered agent. It must be notarized, and it becomes charter from state to operate as a nonprofit in Louisiana. These articles are pretty simple. There's a form online, just print it off, but all the other things must be included. You have to have a physical address, not a PO box. Bylaws. These are legal requirements of bylaws. You must have in your bylaws your bylaws are going to talk about how you're operating your organization and your board of directors. So you must have quorum requirements, voting rights. You may have voting or non-voting members on your board. Your selection of officers. How are you going to select them and who nominates them? And your executive committees. There are several different types of executive committees that you'll see in the following slides. Application for 501c3, the key parts. And when you're filling out this massive form, you will need your narrative. What are you doing? What are you doing in the community? How is your mission going to help the community? Your board members, who are your board members? Your fundraising activities, what are you going to do to raise money? Your budget, which we touched on before. You make sure you have a very clear and concise budget. Public charity, private foundation, what type of 501c3 you're looking for, and any conflicts of interest. So if you have somebody who is working, who's on your board but may have a conflict, that has to be disclosed in a letter in the 501c3 application. These are typically the filing fees. Your EIN is free. Form 1023 is $600. However, if you fill out the Form 1023-EZ, it's $275. There are different requirements and different pieces of that your CPA or lawyer, whoever's helping you prepare this form, will be able to determine which form you need, the EZ or the regular. Securing your name with Secretary of State is $25. Your articles of incorporation with Secretary of State is $75 plus the cost of notarizing. Okay, let's see. So develop policies and procedures manual. This is really important if when you start moving forward and how you're going to do that. And this might be part of your initial strategic plan. But some of the things on your checklist should be in articles of incorporation, bylaws, written expectations for board members. Are they, when you recruit and bring in board members, they need to know if they're going to be expected to make a donation or raise funds for the organization. Are there any moral or codes of conduct, any kind of confidentiality agreements? And then make sure that they understand what their expectations are. Are this going to be a working board and you don't have employees, or are they just going to be more of a governing body and lean on the executive director? Is there a contract? Make sure you have a conflict of interest policy and conflict of interest statements. You need both of those. Personnel policies, if you're going to have employees, volunteer policies, which run parallel with your personnel policies, but you need to have those in place. Financial policies. It's very important that you have financial policies in place for auditing purposes and filling out your 990s and those type of things at the end of the year. The annual reports, your 990, fundraising policies. How are you going to raise money? And what are those policies involved? And that includes donor acceptance of gifts, fundraising consultant policy. Maybe you need to hire somebody, and a public policy advocacy policy. I'm sorry, public policy for advocacy. We're also going to open a bank account, determine your insurance needs, risk management assessment. This is really important to talk to somebody in the insurance field about what your nonprofit needs. Each nonprofit will touch different areas of your environment. So you may have animal rescue, or you may have an education outside. And so what are your liabilities involved with that? And directors and officers insurance is really important for your board of directors. The directors and officers insurance protects your board from any liability claims or anything like that up to a certain extent. So just make sure you talk to an insurance person, get that risk management assessment and see what you need. And if you're transporting anybody or anything, you may need other different types of insurance, and just kind of think about what your mission is and what you're doing, and have a very good picture when you talk to your insurance person. Establish an accounting system. New nonprofits a lot of times don't have money for a very in-depth accounting system. So make sure that you maybe talk to a CPA about what they recommend, but some of them are Peachtree, FundEasy, QuickBooks for nonprofits. They're all pretty easy to use, very user-friendly, and most CPAs are able to work with us. Establish an operations calendar. Your calendar is going to lay out for the year your board meetings, your annual events, fundraising events, and things like that, and just have that clear. And maybe if you don't have a website, not all startup nonprofits have a website, but at least maybe you have some kind of calendar working within your board, and also your employees, if you have employees, so they understand where you are in the year and what is established. Reminders about nonprofit organizations. Okay, nonprofit organizations are formal organizations, and they are a business. It is incorporated in the state where it will provide services, must follow state and federal laws, is created to contribute to the community, does not give out profits to people or businesses. It invests the money and makes back into the mission, relies on volunteers to govern the organization's affairs and to assist with the implementation of its services. And that's all I have for my presentation, but I'm happy to start answering questions.
Thanks, everyone. As I stated earlier, everyone to put their questions in the chat. I don't see any questions at this time, so if you guys want to raise your hand or, whatever questions you have, now is the time to ask Ms. Beatty.
Okay, so I'm reading the chat. Let me get into it. Let's see. Financial limit for nonprofits. And I apologize if I am saying your name right. Is it Ruda? Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, my name is Ruda, and I got that question asked kind of like privately. And so that's me putting it to the front. Are there any limits that that restrict kind of a nonprofit?
And I guess I would want some clarity on what that means, because, the nonprofits, they have ranges anywhere from, they don't operate on any budget all the way to $10 to $20 million or more budget. So I don't know what they mean by financial limits. If they can question you privately and we can get some clarity, I'd be happy to answer that question.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. There are so many 501c3 designations. Let me pull up my presentation and go back to some of them. Okay, so the section 504, I'll just pull up my screen again. Let's see where we are. Is this the screen you were looking for? The section 501c4, social welfare organizations, homeowners associations, volunteer fire companies, 501c5, labor unions, 501c6 includes chambers of commerce. And section 501k is child care organizations. Section 501c3, which I mainly touched on today, would be your private foundations and public charities. Also churches and religious organizations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I
would like to go ahead and introduce Ruda. I know he asked a question earlier. Ruda is going to actually help us with the question and answers in this section, and he is our Fuse Executive Fellow. So he'll help us with the questions. Thanks, Ruda.
You're very welcome. And so I see a hand raised by Cody's Nola. If you want, you can come off mute and ask your question.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. I'm turning the camera off. Can you talk about, and I came on about 10 minutes late, so you may have mentioned this. Louisiana Alliance is that similar to I'm part of Louisiana Restaurants?
Cody, hold on just a second. Like you broke up just in the middle of your inquiry. We were beginning to hear you clearly, but you broke up at toward the middle.
Okay.
Maybe try your question again.
Is this better?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. Can you talk about the Alliance for Nonprofits? And so the way that I'm thinking about your organization is that I'm a member of the LRA, Louisiana Restaurant Association. And so that connects me to opportunities with the National Restaurant Association, because I see you're part of a national chapter. And so through my membership with Louisiana Restaurant Association, I have access to different forms. So in your presentation, you talked about, having these different like volunteer agreements and things of that nature. So is that something that you all make available to the members, templates, and what other benefits are there in being a member of the Louisiana Association of Nonprofit and Alliance? I'm sorry, I'm messing up the name of your organization, but can you talk about that if you haven't already?
Yeah, sure. So our members enjoy just many different things. One of them is directors and officers insurance discount through Council Services Plus. We also have discounts on all of our programming. We do consultations. You get a member discount on consultations or any kind of planning or any kind of needs that your board needs. So if we need to come in and do a session with y'all, you would get a discount on those services. We are associated with the National Council of Nonprofits. However, we don't have membership benefits any longer to extend to our members. However, we can provide resources from them to our members. We also have an annual conference coming up, so our members would get a discount for the annual conference registration fee. Also, we have partnerships with Mutual of America. For a lot of smaller nonprofits don't have access to any kind of retirement system or benefits system, and we have that. Also, we have networking events for executive director roundtables and all different kinds of programming and education services that we're putting in place with our new marketing and rebranding. So those are coming down the pipeline. We hope to have a big announcement for those. That's just a very basic and brief overview, but does that answer your question?
It does. For me, like as you stated in the presentation, there are a lot of things that you need to have in place to be, system in terms of like the systems and the different forms and documents. And when you're up and coming nonprofit and your staff is small and you're securing funding, you don't necessarily have the opportunity to be all things just like starting a business. So really just looking for what resources you were able to share in terms of like those different agreements we need to have, those different, forms that people need to fill out.
Absolutely. So I'm going to drop my email address in chat here shortly, and you can email me with any questions, or if you need any of those forms, I can do my best to get them over to you as quickly as possible.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the next question that came in was, can a board member get paid if he or she functions as executive director?
Okay, so a board member cannot function as executive director. Those are two very different positions. An executive director is not a voting member on the board. They advise the board or report to the board. So a board member does not get paid. An executive director can be a paid employee, but they can't be the same people. I know it's a little bit confusing, but.
Okay, so the next question, did Cody's Nola still have another question, or was that a residual hand raise?
No, I take my hand down. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I try my best to acknowledge folks, so the next question is it suggested to have startup funds for nonprofits?
Yes, it's always suggested to have startup funds for nonprofits. And that is, you have to be very careful in your startup funds though. If you're going out in the community and saying, I am going to start this nonprofit and I have these startup funds, and people may assume that you have your 501c tax status and that they can give you money and then get that tax donation break or whatever that they're looking for. That doesn't work. So you have to be very clear in your communication that if you need funds to start your nonprofit, to start the programming while you're waiting for your 501c tax status, you have to be very clear in that verbiage that you're giving them that, yes, we have registered with Secretary of State. We are a charitable organization in the state of Louisiana. However, we are still applying or in the process of applying for a 501c3. So you can get startup funds, but you have to be very careful with your donors and making sure that there's full transparency there.
So the next question that I got was, can an LLC qualify for grants prior to setting up a nonprofit?
That's going to depend on the grant maker. So a lot of times you have to be a 501c or have some kind of 501 tax identification to apply for those grants. On what those regulations are and how you apply.
So I see lots of inquiries around getting access to the slides. The slides will be made available online. Let me copy and paste the links here. Just for anybody that needs them or wants to see the previous sessions as well. Guys, I also don't think that I'm doing such a good job that all of your questions are answered. If I've missed some, please feel free to drop them in the chat, come off mute, raise your hand. I'm looking to acknowledge folks to ask questions.
I'm sorry. This is David Johnson. How do you raise your hand? You have to forgive me. I was trying
Oh, so no. So in Zoom, there should be the option to raise your hand under, I believe it's reactions. But David, since you're off mute now and if you have a question, go for it.
Okay. Thank you. My question, because the comments related to startup funds and us having the ability that, to budget for the beginning, for the period between in which we've raised funds in our initial startup, do we treat this entity the same way we do a for-profit business, in the sense that the board members or the initial founders have equity in this business the same way you would have an owner's equity? Is it treated that same way? Because I know the funds will not be distributed, but let's say I put in 20,000 and 3 other people put in 20,000 for 60,000 total in startup. Is that treated as donation or as owner's equity? And that's my question.
Okay, so there is no owner's equity in a nonprofit. It would be treated as a donation. However, if your 501c3 application is denied, you will have a grace period to reapply and to be able to give your donors their tax donation letter. So you have to really make sure that before you take big, large sums of money, that those donors understand that you are in the startup and still applying for your 501c3. But owner's equity is not used in nonprofit. Those terms aren't used. It would just be donations into your nonprofit. Does that help?
Yeah, and that would include
perfect.
That I contribute, not just other donors, but when I
Right.
Good, thank you.
It would still be considered a donation.
Perfect, thank you.
Ruta, I actually have a question. Someone asked to please repeat the fee structure.
Okay, the fee structure for, let's see, let me go down. Just want to make sure I'm telling you correctly. Okay, the EIN with the IRS is free, just that EIN application. Form 1023, you'll have to determine if you're going to file a Form 1023-EZ or a regular application, and that Form 1023 is your 501c3 application with the IRS. That can be $275 or $600. It depends on what form. I 100% suggest talking to a CPA or a lawyer or somebody who is familiar with filling out these applications and determining those fees. Securing your name with Secretary of State is $25, and the Articles of Incorporation to file with Secretary of State is $75 plus the cost of notarizing.
Okay, so I see AJ's hand up. AJ, you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, so my question is, the application itself to become nonprofit is strictly through the IRS, correct? You submit all the documents that you were talking about through the IRS, and that's it? That's the only place that you need to do that?
Oh, no, the Secretary of State, that's where you file your articles and you file your everything that involves the Secretary of State. The IRS is only taking your EIN number, or that's where you apply for your EIN number, and your 1023 application, which is your 501c3 status.
Okay.
Did that answer?
I guess it does, but I guess my question is, once the IRS is who tells you whether you are a nonprofit or not, I guess that's my question.
Yeah, they give you that 501c3 tax designation. That's correct. Yes.
And Ruta, I see Cody. Cody's have another question here. Can you list the risk? If
The risk
any,
with,
you
the
see
risk,
it?
if any, with with fiscal sponsorship.
Okay, Cody, can you come off mute again? I guess I'm not sure what you mean by the risks of a fiscal sponsorship.
So I'm already a 501c3, and if I wanted to partner with someone who's in the process of becoming a 501c3 as be their fiscal sponsor, what are the different that I need to consider?
The fiscal agent, that's a very in-depth, detailed conversation. And so I would really like to talk to you offline about that because there are specific risks and it can go into a lengthy conversation. If you'll send me an email, I'll be happy to schedule a time to talk to you about that.
I think if it's that lengthy, I'm just not going to do it, but I think.
No, I mean, it's not that lengthy. I'm just saying that there are definitely things that you have to consider being someone's fiscal agent. A lot of times community foundations and other larger nonprofits will do that for other people, but there are things that need to be considered on how you move forward with it. So I'm happy to talk offline in a separate, because that's a little bit more than a nonprofit 101.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
A little bit of translation from that inquiry. It sounds like if there's something that you're interested in doing or knowing, there is probably a way to go about doing it. So continue to ask questions. I did see a hand raised just a second ago, and then they put it down. Apparently, like my orations answered their questions. If anybody has any questions or can't figure out how to raise their hand, please come off mute. We'll be respectful of not trying to talk over each other. If anybody has any other questions.
Hi, I have a question. Hi everybody. My name is Christy. I am already a nonprofit. I've been a nonprofit for a while. I just kind of wanted to know if there are any other resources that will help kind of like overlook my 501c3, because there's a couple of programs that I want to still be as a nonprofit. Do I start another nonprofit for those other things, or do I do it under my nonprofit that I have now?
So you're saying you was, I'm sorry.
So I have a dance school that is a 501c3. But I also have a mentoring program that is also that I would like to still be under the 501c3. I'm wondering, is that something that I should keep separate, or should they be together?
It depends on your mentoring program and your mission. So if you're going to step outside of your mission, that can become a little bit of a gray area. And the mentoring program, I guess, would relate to education and not dance. Is that correct?
It will have more education, but we're still mentoring them through dance. So those students will still get opportunity to dance, but it's more into like the mentor portion of it over just you come into dance classes, the techniques and the outreach like that is more to it with the mentoring.
That sounds like another question that I would really want to dive into and get some more information before I would give you 100%. Yes, stay under your 501c3 or not. What you, in a nutshell, you could extend your mentoring program under the current 501c. You just have to, make some amendments in your bylaws and with your mission statement on how you're going to move forward. And if that programming really going to affect your bottom line on your budgets, and do you have the money to fund that extra programming? So again, my email is in the chat. I would be happy to talk to you more about how you're moving forward with it and maybe some suggestions on what to do in a separate conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the next question that got dropped in the chat, and we're trying to tick these off really, really quickly, is how is it that large nonprofits have presidents on staff and get paid? Is that position separate from the board? An example was given of GNOF, the Greater New Orleans Housing Foundation.
Yes, that's a different structure in their board and how it's set up in their bylaws and in their organization with paid and non-paid staff. So they probably have a chair of the board and a president, and then they probably have an executive director or different positions and executive positions.
Awesome. The next question that was dropped in the chat. Sorry, let me just read this one out. I know you have to file a 990 with the IRS. My question is, do you have to file anything with the Department of Revenue?
So the Department of Revenue, the Louisiana Department of Revenue has different requirements, and it depends on if you're selling things, if you have a retail out of your nonprofit, and what you have to that. Also, there's, any kind of raffles, fundraising. There's also forms and applications you have to file with those departments of the Department of Revenue. And then it just depends with your CPA. They will determine what you'll have to file. You do have to do an annual report with the Secretary of State, which is different from the Louisiana Department of Revenue. So I would just double check on the type of nonprofit and what you're doing in your nonprofit if you have to file anything else with Department of Revenue.
Awesome. So guys, at the moment, I don't see any other questions. I'm taking this opportunity to drop Christian's contact information in the chat, just so it's top of everybody's mind. If there weren't any other questions, or if I don't see anybody's hand raised or anybody's mute buttons unmuted, going once, going twice, I will return the mic to Madam Margaret.
Thank you so much, Ruda. And I know you saw in the chat box, they love your enthusiasm. So I'll go ahead and show the flyer. Like I said, this is the first of 3 sessions. Our next session is next Thursday, September the 29th, and we're gonna have nonprofit public relations and marketing. And that's gonna be presented by the the Public Relations Association of Louisiana. I would love to have you guys to come and join us, and I'm trying to get that screen up now for you guys. And as you can see, the last one is Thursday, October the 6th. And that one will be nonprofit grant writing and fundraising presented by the Association of Fundraising Professionals. This information that was provided today is being recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel. Just allow time for editing. So I would say give it at least 5 to 10 business days. Remember to check your emails for all reminders, and I hope you guys will join us soon. We'll see if there's any more questions before we actually end the session. Are there any more questions?
Also, for the good of the order, I have included the link to where you can view all of the sessions. I've also resubmitted Ms. Beatty's contact information and a registration link for all of the future sessions for everybody's benefit.
Thanks again, Ruda. I appreciate that. So again, my name is Margaret McGee. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And I would love to see you guys next week. Have a great day.